Look at you, looking all bright and spiffy.
That's me.
I want this to be less of a Q&A. Well, it won't be a Q&A, really. I would love for it to just be a conversation. I've been watching you a little bit lately, walking into the lion's den. There's been a couple of episodes where I've seen you kind of walk into the room with, people who are obviously don't view the world the way you view the world. Is that something new? Is that something you're doing more of?
I have invited frequently, truly frequently, I have invited people that I have criticized on my radio show onto my radio show, and I'm batting almost zero. And so when people I differ with, usually people on the left, and by left, I mean left rather than liberal. My problem with liberals is that I think they're naive, but I don't think they're bad. I do think that leftists are bad. And since I measure people by their behavior, not by their intentions, almost nobody intends bad. So it's irrelevant what people's intentions are. So when they invite me, I tend to accept their offer. The invitations are not legion. So I welcome that ability to engage in some discourse with people whom either I have personally on the air criticized or just in general. But as I say, my experience has been with folks on the left that they prefer to smear rather than debate. So that, for example, I came up with an acronym about 20 years ago, SIXHERB: sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist, bigoted. They choose from that list. Now they've added transphobic, but they choose from a list of appellations. And that's the extent. If I say a man cannot become a woman, I'm called a transphobe. That doesn't answer the question. Can a man become a woman is what I would like to discuss with someone who really believes a man can become a woman. But to call me a transphobe means you really don't know how to debate. You only know how to label. And so it's a long answer to your short question.
No, but I think that that's the culture in which you're in. And later on, before we get off here, I really do want to talk about culture and religion, for example. But you've already said so many things that are really good here that I just want to just linger around a little bit. One, you made a distinction between liberal and leftist. Kind of comb that out for us a little bit, but also you said you don't believe that there is such a thing as evil. I'm a Christian. I clearly believe there.
Forgive me.
I'm sorry.
I did say that. Oh, there certainly is evil. That's what I said.
So sorry.
There were no bad intentions.
Right. And so I will differ with that just a little bit because I do. Although I'm incapable of knowing the operation of someone's mind, I can look at what they're doing and I can kind of like the fruits on their tree and say, this is a bad apple or this is a bad tree producing bad fruits. Do you agree with that or no?
So let me explain. Tell me if this answers your question. This is very important to me, and I'm happy you're asking me to amplify on it. Very few people wake up in the morning, including Hitler, and think, how can I do evil today? The vast majority of people who do bad things do not wake up thinking, I want to do bad. When it's ideological evil, as opposed to the individual sadist, we'll leave that aside. When it's ideological evil, which has been the great majority of evil in the last 100 years, Nazism and communism, Nazis did not wake up thinking, I'm going to do evil, and communists didn't wake up saying, I'm going to do evil. But they slaughtered together, the Nazis, 10 million, 6 million Jews, and millions of others, and the communists killed about 90 million. I'm not talking about in war. This is not combatants. But they didn't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, good, another day to do evil. That is why intentions, when I'm told that somebody has good intentions, that you might as well tell me the person breathes. It doesn't mean anything. I only judge behavior.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How do you differentiate between intentions and actions? If the actions are evil, does that not come from evil intentions? How are you distinguishing between someone's intentions? And I'm glad you mentioned the word Hitler, because going back to those labels, once someone who's not a Jew mentioned Hitler, all of a sudden I'm labeled with something, right?
Okay, so let's forget Hitler. Let's talk about Stalin. Stalin murdered about 40 million people.
Yes,
Mao
he did.
murdered about 60 million people. Neither of them thought that they were doing evil. I've studied communism all of my life. I learned Russian in order to study communism in the Soviet Union. I was in communist countries repeatedly. These people justified all of their massacres in the name of equality and moving humanity forward. Or as Lenin put it, in order to make an omelet, you have to break eggs. So I know evil pretty well. Hamas does not think they did evil. They didn't say, great, we did evil. They videoed what they did because they were so proud of it.
So I guess the question is, do I care what someone's intentions are?
No.
Okay. I care about the actions because I
only.
find what Hamas did to be utterly evil. And I find those who try to make these moral equivalences, I find it, I don't even know where to begin with just how utterly ridiculous. And I find that to be evil. I don't want to overuse the word evil. It's kind of like people overusing the word racist. It doesn't mean anything that much any longer. But there is, for a lack of a better word, just sheer evil when you try to find people who try to spend all their time focused on intentions versus the actions that I'm looking at are clearly heinous actions. So to your point, my question was, should I care about intentions? You say no, because all I'm caring about are the actions. And yet though, you brought up intentions. So if I shouldn't care about intentions, but focusing on people's actions, why did you bring it up?
Because I wanted to make the point that this very point, I brought it up because it's very important. A lot of people excuse evil by talking about what they perceive the person's intentions. Many, from what I've read, I've never personally, thank God, it's never been even anywhere in my own world where a husband or a boyfriend has abused his wife or girlfriend. But even there, what I have read is so often they will say, oh, I really love her, which in some perverse way may be true, but who cares? I'd rather you didn't love her and didn't beat her. So I raised it because it is so significant. Let us measure what was done. Why it was done is significant too. But we are living it. I raise it for another reason. We are living in a feelings culture. I have warned about this all of my life, where people measure themselves, let alone others, by their feelings. So, for example, I feel for people who say, I feel for young people who say they are the other sex. So therefore, out of concern for them, I will give them hormone blockers, which may ruin their lives at some point, either then or later in their life. Or, yes, that's the reason we're removing a healthy 18-year-old girl's breasts, because she thinks she's a boy. So these people truly believe, these people in children's hospitals, that they are good people doing good things because they're based on feelings. Yeah, but you have removed a healthy girl's breasts. Isn't the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm? Isn't the right answer for a 12-year-old who says that she is a boy some sort of psychiatric care to say, well, you're not, dear, you are not a boy. You can't become a boy. And I am not going to ruin your body because you got this idea into your mind.
Well, clearly we're not there in this culture, and the culture in which we find ourselves in. And I actually wrote about this in my book. By chance, have you read Oscar Lewis' book La Vida?
No, but
I love reading, but he's an anthropologist, and he meticulously recorded the day-to-day livings of a particular family in Puerto Rico. And he did this over a decade or more. The book came out, I think, like maybe late 50s. But nonetheless, he meticulously chronicled the living of this particular family in one of the poorest places in Puerto Rico, in San Juan. And he coined the phrase culture of poverty, indicating that poverty cannot just be measured in dollars and cents, that it is a culture that surrounds that poverty. A culture, when you came on, I said, you're a part of my ecosystem. It's like culture is an ecosystem, right? It's different. It's the way we think, the way we talk, the way we behave. It's the atmosphere in which we wake up in, go to bed in, raise our family in. And that is the culture. And one of the lines of thinking that I had when I wrote my first book was that the book came out early 2020. I kind of pinned it to the elections. And I was saying at that time, the Republican Party, that if we are not vigilant, if we do not win, then instead of talking about attaching an ethnicity to culture, like Black culture, Asian culture, whatever, white culture, I'm just going to lump it into there's a broad culture, a broader American culture, and then there's a subculture. And what I was warning, putting out little harbingers, is that if we don't wake up and pay attention, and if we allow Democrats, this particular version of the Democrat Party that is captured by the left, if we allow them to gain power, what we're going to see is the things that we know exist, but they happen in the alleys, in the back alleys somewhere, like grown men wearing prostitute attire. We know that stuff happens, but it happens in the back alley somewhere. But I was warning that if we allow this version of the left to win, then the things we have allowed to occur in the back alleys are going in this subculture. It's going to begin to seep out and capture the broader American culture. And I'm not a prophet, but my book is kind of reading like prophecy, because now we have grown men dressed in women attire or prostitute attire reading story time to our 5-year-old. And if you say something about it, then you're a transphobe, you're labeled, you're evil, you're bad. And so that's the culture in which we find ourselves in. And kind of connecting that with what you were saying earlier about the importance of the culture. Well, our culture has been captured. As you answered my question, distinguish from what you said earlier, making a distinction between liberals and leftists, but how do we recapture our culture?
There are two issues that I want to address here. One is difference between liberal and leftist. So I've done a video for PragerU on it. All our videos are 5 minutes, and I give about 7 examples of differences between liberalism and leftism. And I've also written a column on the subject, easily found on the internet, Dennis Prager, differences between liberals and leftists, or liberalism and leftism. So I'll just give a couple of examples. The liberal has believed that race is insignificant. That is the most basic liberal view of race. It means nothing if you're white. It means nothing if you're Black. All that matters is you, how you behave, the type of human being you are. And it's so easily proven. If I tell anyone, even a leftist. So, so-and-so, Joe Smith is black. Tell me one thing you know about Joe Smith. And of course, you get crickets. You know nothing. If I tell you Joe Smith is white, do you know anything about Joe Smith? Crickets again, you know nothing. So in other words, even a leftist can't answer the question, if you know someone's color, do you know anything else about them? Do you know any more than you know if you know the color of their shoes or their eyes? You know nothing. Race is completely insignificant. And that was the liberal view. The whole aim was to become race blind. Yet the University of California considers the statement race blind to be a microaggression of racism. This is a list. You could find a list. I've published that list, but it's easily found on the University of California website. Microaggressions. Statements that are really racist. It is racist to say there is only one race, the human race. That is what is taught to students at the University of California and virtually every other university. If you just say there's one race, the human race, you are a racist. The most racist views of our time are all on the left. There are a handful of right-wing. If Ku Klux Klan is considered right-wing, yes, then there are. Although it was invented by the Democratic Party, but we'll put that aside. So that's one example, race. Liberals would not have all black dormitories. Leftist universities have some all black dormitories or all black graduation ceremonies. That's one example. Liberals were massive believers in free enterprise and capitalism because liberals cared about lifting the poor from poverty. There's no other economic system that has ever lifted the poor other than capitalism. So the left hates capitalism. They have since Karl Marx to this day, to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's a third example. Liberals have always been pro-Israel. The left hates Israel. The left supports people who wish to exterminate Israel. I have a whole list of examples. Those are three. There was another issue that you raised, and in addition to the liberal, what was the very last thing? Do you recall?
How do we recapture our culture? Our culture has been captured. It seemed pretty obvious to me that if this version of the Democrat Party should take office in 2020, that what was considered a subculture would begin to seep over and capture the dominant culture, the American culture.
Right. No, yeah, that was entirely accurate. And what can we do? Well, the answer, there are a number of answers, but essentially, the United States of America became the greatest country in the world. By great, I don't mean perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect society because it's composed of human beings who are deeply flawed creatures. Nevertheless, given the flaws of human beings, it is amazing how decent America became, where it gave more people of more colors, of more ethnicities, of more nationalities and more religions, more opportunity and more freedom than any other society in human history. The left hates that culture. They hate Western civilization. They took down Shakespeare's mural at the Department of English at the University of Pennsylvania. And the reason was simple, not because he's not the greatest writer of English. He is. But they don't care in the English departments of our universities about great English. They care about color. So instead they put up a non-white lesbian poet as instead of Shakespeare. Does anyone argue that she writes as well as Shakespeare? Nobody does. So the answer to your question is, what are the founding values of the society? And I have coined the term many years ago. I explained it at length in my book, Still the Best Hope, which is about leftism, Americanism, and Islamism. And it is the American Trinity is found on every coin. E pluribus unum, from many one, liberty, and in God we trust. That is the finest trinity, if you will, of social values ever created. It has been the American Trinity. The left hates all of them. It hates from many one. Its motto is from many, many. It finds the idea of a melting pot to be vile. As regards liberty, there is no example in the history of the left, from the French Revolution to the Russian Revolution to the leftist revolution in America, of the left allowing liberty. If you allow liberty, you're either a liberal or a conservative. And in God we trust, needless to say, they regard the idea that we get our rights and our value as a human being from God, and specifically the Bible, as nonsense and pernicious nonsense. If we go back to those three things, liberty and God we trust and e pluribus unum, we have our culture back.
I think so. And not only our culture, but I believe because politics flows downhill from culture, that we will begin to win again. One of the things I was thinking when we lost in this recent election just a couple of weeks ago, before the ink could dry on Tuesday night, when it became clear the Republican Party was going to lose across the nation races we should have won, before the ink could dry on that loss, Republicans began to give reasons. And the primary reason was because of abortion. And so now there is a move within the Republican Party to sound and behave more like the left, right? Abandon any conversations, whether federal ban or whether state ban. It does. I'm not here to argue for one or the other, but abandon our position on our deeply held position that life begins in the womb and that we should protect life wherever it may find itself, whether in the womb or later or at any other stage in life. You see, I see a rush to begin to sound more like Democrats on the issue, which is the opposite of what you're saying, of going back to those Judeo-Christian values that our nation was founded upon, that life is one of the greatest of liberties that we have, the pursuit of life. What do you think about that?
Just to establish my views, I am pro-life. I have made the most widely viewed video in the world, in my opinion, or at least the English-speaking world, on behalf of the idea that the human fetus is infinitely precious. So it's at PragerU. People are certainly free to watch it. Having said that, I distinguish, even in that video, I distinguish between legality and morality. What we should be doing, those of us who believe the simply irrefutable, even secular notion that there is infinite worth or some worth to the human fetus. The left holds there is no worth to the human fetus unless the woman carrying the fetus wants to give birth to it. It's amazing that it's overwhelmingly religious people who find a problem with that view. But it would seem to me that if you are rational and an atheist, you would understand that's a bizarre idea, that only the woman determines the worth of that which she is carrying.
I have always said that. Doesn't that make me God?
Well, among other things, it's not rational. But I just want to finish this point. I would spend much more time arguing the morality of the issue and gradually convincing Americans than I would push for bans, especially in the arenas that we then can lose some elections on, like rape and incest. Is a child infinitely precious if it's produced by rape? Yes, it is. But I don't believe that purity is a good idea in fighting on earth. If you are not willing to compromise, and you therefore lose the entire war, what have you gained? The left is destroying Western civilization. And we need to win. We need to defeat the left. And if therefore some compromise is necessary, okay, no ban in our state or in our country if there is rape or incest. I am willing to make that compromise, as are many pro-life people, because the best is so often the enemy of the better. I want to change minds on the abortion issue. I would like, for example, this is what I would like to pass. Instead of bans, I would like to pass this law. Before a woman has an abortion, she simply has to know what she is doing to give informed consent. That's all. We'd like to show you a video of what it is that you are doing. And then you have your choice. But we feel that we owe you morally the obligation that you give informed consent.
How would you define morality?
Morality is the distinction between what is right and what is wrong.
I agree. How do you get that sense of morality?
It's an excellent question. And those who think you get it from the conscience don't understand how much evil is done by people with clear consciences. Every Nazi and every communist went to bed with a clear conscience. So the conscience in a handful of people is really reliable, and in the vast majority of people is silly putty. People form their conscience. The conscience doesn't form people in the great majority of cases, given that so many people who have done horrible things had perfectly clear consciences. So therefore, you need something that transcends the conscience. The best thing I know of is, in fact, the Bible. And the eradication of the Bible as the source of values in our society, and it was to all the founders, with the possible exception of Tom Paine, all the founders, even the ones who didn't believe, as traditional Christians do, they may not have believed in the divinity of Jesus, but they did believe that the Bible was the wisest book ever written, which in fact it is, and the abandonment of it has produced the moral chaos in which we find ourselves today.
Now, when I asked you the question about how do we recapture our culture, you said to go back to those Judeo-Christian values upon which we were founded upon. But in the present culture in which we live in, there is such a rush by many to abandon Judeo-Christian values and to replace it with humanism. This is my opinion. I would love to get your opinion on it. But to your point, humanism, meaning, what I consider to be right and wrong comes from within me, and I'm going to just throw off any shackles or any notion of a God or some higher being. That doesn't bring us to a place of getting back. I mean, it moves us away from the values that started this nation. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are many who believe that America can exist apart from Judeo-Christian values, and that somehow we as people, there's something good within us that we could just, reimagine. I hear the left saying it. Throw off these Western normative traditions and let's reimagine based upon how we as individuals see it. That is, I feel, a very prevalent notion in our culture today.
Well, as I often point out, only secular people say men give birth. That should give people a little warning as to the moral chaos when you drop the Judeo-Christian bases of right and wrong. It is a real challenge to secular people. Now, there are secular people who don't say men give birth, but only secular people do say it.
And now what about those who don't?
Forgive me, let me just add, it was secular people who supported communism, the greatest mass murder movement in the history of the world. Religious people tended not to. There is chaos. When you don't have a divine commandment, then you end up with moral chaos. And that's why my life in many ways has been devoted to spreading the 10 Commandments. If people, as I've often said, if you want to defund the police, there is only one way. Have everybody live by the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have secular people doing what secular people do, and they believe that a man can have a baby. And not only do they believe it, they are forcing others to agree with it and to say it, to applaud it. as well, where they're changing laws. They're introducing laws that if you misgender someone, if you're not willing to go along with the confusion of another, then somehow you should be punished. So that is happening. So there are those who say men can have babies, and they're actually changing laws to force the rest of us to play along.
Only secular people say that men who say they're women can compete against women in women's sports.
And they're competing and winning. So what do we do? Because that is the reality. We have, there is, I don't believe there's a 50% split between those who agree that a grown man dressing in prostitute attire should be reading story time to 5-year-olds. I don't believe that that's a 50-50. I don't believe that 50% of the nation think that's a good idea. I think it's more like 80-20. And yet men are being allowed to walk into 5-year-old classrooms and read story time to them, or do even more perverted things in front of children, lap dancing I've seen in front of them. So it takes me back to one of my original questions. This is the reality. You and I both know there are only two genders. You and I both know men cannot have babies. And yet we're living in a culture where the minority, there's a tyranny of the minority. They have risen up and they are forcing pretty successfully their way, their view, their thinking onto the majority. So how do we take our country back?
That happens to be the truth in every society. Again, my field of study was communism. A tiny percentage of the Soviet people were members of the Communist Party. The fact that most Soviet citizens weren't communists, most German citizens were not Nazis, is unfortunately irrelevant. That's why when people tell me, well, not all Palestinians are Hamas, so what? Not all Germans were Nazi. The dominant element among Germans in the 30s and 40 till 45 was Nazism, and communism was the dominant ideology of China from 1945 and in the Soviet Union since 1917. So the history of evil is not they got the majority to agree. You don't need the majority to do massive, staggering evil. How do we get it back? If liberals understood that the left is their enemy and not the right, if liberals understood that they share far more with conservatives than with leftists, it would solve the problem tomorrow. Unfortunately, liberals do not vote their values. Leftists vote their values and conservatives vote their values, but liberals do not. Liberals vote leftists into office. And that's the tragedy of America today.
So where's the hope?
The hope is in persuading them. That's why I devote so much of my time to broadcasting and PragerU and writing and going on podcasts like yours. The answer is to persuade them. Maybe some have been awakened by what happened in Israel on October 7th. Maybe. I'm not entirely optimistic about that, but that's the hope.
That was pretty deranged. Clearly, if we were looking for an opportunity to identify evil, October 7th was that opportunity for us. And yet I see, again, a culture captured almost into paralysis on whether or not, on which side of this line they're going to stand. And we see pro-Palestinian rallies. I too believe there's very little sunlight between the Palestinian people and Hamas. I'm generalizing because I don't know every single Palestinian, but I've read enough. I know enough to walk away and say, to your point, I don't care about their intentions. I care about their actions. And this is wrong. And this cannot be tolerated. And yet I was a little bit stunned by the paralysis and otherwise rational people.
You're talking about those who support them in America when you say otherwise rational people.
Otherwise rational people who will look at October 7th and say, clearly, that is evil what Hamas did. But because a minority of Americans who are in this country are protesting, signing letters, marching onto the White House or Congress, Capitol Hill, they've become paralyzed. Otherwise, rational people who would stand up and denounce what Hamas has done, because of how bold and loud the minority is, they become paralyzed into silence.
That's one factor, absolutely. Another factor is it shows you the left assault on the ability to discern between good and evil has been very effective. If you're taught from elementary school that the United States is a villainous society, then you are taught that good is bad. So if good is bad, then you can no longer discern good and bad. The greatest support for Hamas among Americans is young people, because they have been, their conscience has been eroded by the left. This is it's a very serious problem.
It is. You know, I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm thinking about a letter from John Adam he wrote to his wife, Abigail, where he says, our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for any other kind. And I've always paused on that, because moral, as you said earlier, is defined as just knowing the difference between right and wrong. And I thought it was so poignant that he would say our Constitution. And I don't believe America does not exist apart from the Constitution. America, as we have known her, does not exist apart from the Constitution, I believe. And I thought it was very apropos that he would say our Constitution, i.e. America, does not exist for people who have lost their sense of right and wrong. And I think that has been, in a bad way, one of the most effective jobs that the left has done is to attack the sense of right and wrong, not only in my generation and people in your generation, but in the next generation to inherit this country. And I don't see, other than you and a few others, doing enough on our side to compete and teaching that there is such a thing as right and wrong.
If they allowed us unfettered access to social media and to speaking on college campuses, we would prevail.
Hey, everyone. Just want to interrupt the podcast for a moment to tell you about a special offer. Mike Lindell has done it again. As usual, he's out there in the world finding solutions to problems we all have. My Towels solved a problem that we all had with towels. You go into the store, they look so pretty, they look so soft, they feel soft, they look lotiony, and then you get them home and they don't actually dry your body. Well, that's why Mike Lindell made My Towels. They actually work. They're soft and they absorb. And now My Pillow is excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. Now, what makes them the best towels ever is that they're now made with a 100% long staple Sherpa cotton. This is a comb ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory price of $29.98. Now, you know that's not happening. I'm sure you're out there trying to purchase new towels now. You have friends and family coming over for the holidays, and you know that you're not going to get a 6-piece towel set of this quality for $29.98, but you can go to mypillow.com, use promo code Kathy with a K, or call 800-988-3934. That's 800-988-3934. 3934 and get your 6-piece introductory set for $29.98. You can get a designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save $50. Everyone actually gets dried off and you look like a champ. So they actually work. Just go to mypillow.com and use promo code Kathy with a K. This offer won't last long, so please go order now. I mean, it's a part of the strategy that they don't want you on campus is because you would interfere with their ability to teach their own view of the world.
There is no example. This is a pretty important statement. And if I'm wrong, I should lose credibility. But if I'm right, people should awaken. There's no example that I know of. And I've studied the left all of my life since graduate school at Columbia University, where I studied communism and Russia. There is no example of the left being in power, whether in the country or at an institution, and allowing dissent.
And in order for us to speak truth, because we have, some conservative leaning individuals have started their own social media platform, but to your point, it's not the size or scale of the ones that you've mentioned already. And if an individual like myself or others try to stand up, the very real probability is it's going to cost you something to stand up and tell truth in this culture. What do you advise those particular people, the individuals?
I will not lose my job when I say men do not give birth or a woman cannot become a man. My job is not threatened. But in vast sectors of American life, you could be fired just for saying a man cannot become a woman. J.K. Rowling can't be fired, but look at the Harry Potter author. Look at what has happened to her. The staggering amount of threats and demonization just for saying what I just said. So it takes a lot of courage. It's always taken courage to pursue truth. Truth and goodness are almost synonymous. The pursuit of truth is a courageous act. And it is a truth that a man cannot become a woman. There is no such thing. You can feel that you are, but again, feelings are not the basis of a good world and a good life even. And nobody denies that you can feel that. You can feel a lot of things. It takes courage to say what is true and what is good. And my heart breaks for people who have to weigh between truth and their job.
What is the consequence if we do not begin to speak up? You've studied it. You've learned Russian, as you say, to understand it. What happens in a culture if the people do not stand and begin to speak truth?
We are already moving in that direction. I can't believe that I am saying that America has political prisoners, but it does. It still doesn't resonate with me. America, political prisoners. The government is used to persecute the dissent. And yet that is what has happened since the Biden administration was elected.
Why is there not more uproar from the people? It's obvious, it's clear that our government has weaponized itself, not just against the powerful like Donald Trump, Mike Lindell, very wealthy people who can afford to pay millions of dollars, but even against a pastor, a father of four. I'm thinking of someone here in Pennsylvania. It's obvious. Why is there not more of an uproar from the people?
Because they have a lot to lose, and a lot don't even realize that this is happening because the media doesn't tell them this. The Columbia Journalism Review, to its credit, and I'm quite shocked, frankly, that it even did this. It's the most prestigious journalism review in the country, which doesn't mean it's good. Prestigious and good are not synonymous, but I'm just noting that it is. They wrote an enormous piece about how the Washington Post, New York Times, and other media lied for 2 years about Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. Has it made any difference? Has the New York Times or the Washington Post lost readers as a result of lying for 2 years? And it's lied on any number of issues. No, most people don't want to be bothered. They want to live their lives, go to work, enjoy a beer, and enjoy their family. I mean, nice people. And then there are the others who are activists who want to continue the suppression of dissent. So it's very hard to arouse people to fight for the good. It's really difficult.
What does history tell us about a strategy of arousing people?
That it usually doesn't work.
Really? That's not very helpful, Dennis. I'm looking for a strategy. I'm looking for, what do I need to do?
A strategy I've answered, and I'll answer again if you'd like. You asked, what does history teach? History's lessons are pretty dark. Stalin was defeated. Hitler was defeated. Mao was not defeated. The Maoists still run China. But they were defeated because they went to war with other whole countries. And so people realized, see, when Hitler persecuted the Jews in the 1930s, the vast majority of world leaders said, that's the Jews' problem, not ours. Just like they feel about Hamas, that's the Jews' problem, not ours. I wrote a whole book on this subject 35 years ago. Why the Jews? It's in its third revised edition. And I delineate that every non-Jew who dismisses Jew hatred or anti-Semitism, as it is euphemistically called, as the Jews' problem, is truly acting foolishly. The Jew hater begins with the Jews, never ends with the Jews.
I agree. So here's the strategy, thinking back to, and I've taken copious notes as you were talking, because I was just 3 short years ago, I was living what I would have termed my best life. Homeschooling my children, just put a pool in, dreams of how we were going to spend our summers. And then I downloaded Democrats at this time. Sitting down, teaching my daughter geography. She was studying. And I had downloaded the night before Democrats' bill that they were proposing in 2019 on their border plan, their border bill. And as I was reading it, I thought to myself, my God, if these people win, we are going to lose our country. Now, fast forward several years later to today, and what I read back in 2019 is what we're witnessing today. But I was reading it then. But I remember thinking to myself, if good people don't start getting involved in politics, for example, we're going to lose our country. And that started me down the path 3 years ago. Feels like forever now, but 3 short years ago, of finding ways to get more engaged, which has led me in a path I would have never, if God had given me a notepad and a pen, I would not have written my life as such. And yet here I am, and I'm grateful for it. So I'm talking to you, the uncle I wished I had. I could just pick up the phone and call, and looking for strategy. And as I'm looking over my notes as you're talking, the one that stands out is have the courage to speak truth.
By the way, you mentioned one of the greatest things that people could do. If enough Americans did this, it would be a massive step forward. Homeschool your children.
Homeschooling. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We homeschooled for 6 years because I saw 10 years ago what people are just now waking up to. When my 5-year-old came home And she had in this stack of paperwork that they provide your kids, a letter from the guidance counselor. And when I asked to see the teaching objectives of a guidance counselor to my 5-year-old, it was 35 of the most ridiculous things. Essentially, they were going to parent my child for me. And a part of that was teaching them about different family configurations, which is buzzword for same-sex marriage and everything else that we're contending with. And my husband and I made a decision then that we could do a better job. And we have. My babies are amazing people today, not captured. Their heart, their soul has not been captured by this very intentional ideology, leftist ideology that has come upon us. But nonetheless, homeschooling is a strategy. But for the overwhelming majority of us, I think what I'm walking away with is what I already knew, but I'm glad to see that you agree with it, or that, that what I'm thinking agrees with what you're thinking, is that speaking truth. And it's going to take courage to do that.
That's the answer, is truth and courage, and taking kids out of the corrupted, intellectually corrupted and morally corrupted institutions called schools.
Another thing I think we could do, have a very good dose of, is stop trying to understand the operations of someone's mind, why they do what they do, and just look at what they've done and then judge that as good or bad.
That was my original point. That's correct.
Something you said earlier, going back to my book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, Being Black and Conservative in America, is kind of my journey off what I call the Democrat plantation. And so one thing that captured my attention is when you talked about the left cares about color. And I know you understand the nuance of that, but I just wanted to say they don't care about Black people. I think what they care about is using color as a tool to get the rest of Americans, specifically white people, to shut up, sit down, be quiet, and do as you're told, so that they can get their agenda.
And to keep blacks voting Democrat. I'm off the plantation, as it were, too. I'm a Jew, and I'm not, and I don't vote Democrat. I did when I grew up. It was sort of a given, but it'll be interesting to see, will Jews be shocked by the left and realize that the Democratic Party is the home of the left. It is not the home of the liberal. So I don't have no prediction, but it will be interesting to see. The left is interested in blacks as the feminist left is in women. If they wanted to protect women, they wouldn't allow men who say they're women to compete against them in women's sports. They're destroying women's sports.
What do you think the end goal is then? I mean, because we're all tools in the hands of a group of people who seem to have it all mapped out. It doesn't seem like they're just waking up and just being willy-nilly about this. They appear to have an end, a destination in mind. What does history, well, I don't know, does history tell you? Because apparently it all comes to ruin. But assuming, to your point, that these people are not waking up thinking evil intentions, what is their destination?
Well, the leader's destination is power. The rank and file leftist, the destination is the destroying of Western civilization, which is rooted in, as Margaret Thatcher pointed out, it is a Judeo-Christian civilization. It just is. It is the civilization that abolished slavery, but kids are never taught that. They're taught that America had slaves, which is of course true, but that doesn't tell you anything, since every society on earth had slaves. The only moral question, if you care about morality, is who abolished slavery, not who had slavery.
I was literally having this conversation with my young brother, young Black male, who is, figuring his way out through all of this and saying, why should I care about anyone in in all candor, we were talking about, what's going on in the Middle East right now in Israel. Why should I care about anyone when there were slaves here in America? And that was my point, is that, but we're not slaves anymore.
Well, Frederick Douglass would not have agreed with your brother, and he grew up as a slave.
Oh, I know. Yeah. If you could see right over my head, I have stenciled on my office door, "Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave." That was the Frederick Douglass quote. And it was a powerful one. You're the uncle that I can't call. So let me just ask one more question. Knowledge is not the same as wisdom. Would you agree with that?
It's been one of the themes of my life.
You can Google knowledge. We have a lot of influencers now on Instagram who Google knowledge, go on Instagram, and all of a sudden they're influencers. It's not the same.
No, wisdom is the issue. The wise do good. The knowledgeable without wisdom do bad. And there is no secular institution that offers wisdom, not a single one. It is one of the best arguments for what I said earlier, a Bible-based society, not a theocracy, just a Bible-based society. Where do you get your wisdom? And the answer is from no secular institution. The dumbest, most foolish, most rotten institutions in our society are the universities, and it's not a coincidence they're the most secular.
Thank you. I have a 17-year-old getting ready to graduate from high school, and we've been very mindful. He scored a 30 on his ACT. He can go wherever he wants to go, and we are looking at Bible-based institutions in order to send him there. So once again, thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for the insight. Dennis Prager, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for what you do. I hope to one day meet you.